Hola everypony, mi amo es Crystal Bloodsucker, also known as Serena Earth Pony, and welcome back to another chapter reading of Underground. Last chapter, we discovered that the Goblin King kidnapped Gaz, and now Zim and Dib have 13 hours to solve the labyrinth and get to her and save her. So without further ado, let's get to it. Chapter 3. When Zim and Dib reached the bottom of the hill, they were met with a very unlikely surprise. There was a dwarf there by the labyrinth. He was surrounded by flying creatures, and he held what looked like a bug sprayer. "Excuse me," Dib called, trying to get the dwarf's attention. "Oh, excuse me," the dwarf cried, until he saw who he was talking to. "Oh, it's you." The boys frowned in confusion at the creature's reaction towards them. Why did this dwarf seem not to exactly like their presence? Dib shook it off as he approached him. "Can you help us get through this labyrinth?" he asked, but the dwarf ignored him. "How rude!" Zim snorted. "What could possibly be more important than helping two kids through a maze?" Zim and Dib looked closely at the flying creatures that the dwarf seemed to be disgusted with. They gasped when they realized that they were fairies. "Oh, how sweet!" Dib breathed quietly. "Well, you can cross that off your bucket list, huh, Dibhuman?" Zim chuckled. "No kidding." 57, the dwarf counted as he sprayed his sprayer. Zim and Dib both gasped when they realized that he was spraying the fairies. "How could you?" Dib gasped as Zim gently picked up the injured creature. "Oh, poor thing," Zim frowned as he gently stroked the wings free of the spray. "You monster!" Dib hissed. "Ow!" Zim suddenly cried out in pain and dropped the fairy. The dwarf suddenly stopped what he was doing as both he and Dib turned to look at the disguised Urkin. "What happened?" Dib asked. "The inferior creature bit me!" Zim hissed. "Me, an Urkin invader!" "What?" Dib gasped. "But why?" "Well, what did you expect fairies to do?" the dwarf asked them. "I always thought that they did nice things, like granting wishes," Dib answered. "Yeah, me too," Zim agreed as he flexed his hand, trying to rid it of the awful pain. Shows what you know," the dwarf huffed as he went back to his job. "Are you okay?" Dib asked Zim as he took a look at his bitten hand. Yeah, I think I'll be okay," Zim nodded. 58, the dwarf suddenly grabbed their attention again as he sprayed another fairy. "Even though these inferior creatures are harmful, you're still horrible for spraying them like that," Zim hissed as he pulled his hand away and stalked the wrinkled creature. "No, I'm Hoggle," the dwarf argued. "Who are you?" "Well, I'm Dib, and this is Zim," Dib answered. "That's what I thought." The boys looked at each other, more confused than ever. "Do you know where the door to the labyrinth is?" Dib asked. "Maybe," Hoggle answered before spraying another fairy. 59. "Well, where is it?" Hoggle ignored the boy's question as he sprayed another fairy. 60! Woohoo! he cried as he kicked it to the side. "Hey, dwarf creature! The Dib asked you a question," Zim hissed. "Where is it?" "Where's what?" the dwarf asked. "The door!" "What door?" Zim growled and stomped his foot impatiently. "Enough games! I'm tired of them!" he shouted. "Tell the mighty Zim how to get into the labyrinth now!" Hoggle suddenly stopped and turned around, a pleased look on his face. "Ah, now that's more like it," he smiled. "You gets in there." The boys suddenly jumped when they heard the sound of heavy doors opening. They turned around and gasped when they saw two iron doors that weren't there before. "You're really going in there, are you?" Hoggle asked them. "Yes," Zim breathed. "We don't have a choice," Dib nodded. With that, they both entered the maze. As they entered, they looked around. There were only two paths, a left one and a right one. The only problem was, there was no difference to them whatsoever. The only difference was that the right path was filled with logs and branches, while the left path was completely clear. Not to mention, it was very spooky. "Cozy, isn't it?" Hoggle started the two boys, laughing at them as they jumped. "Now, would you go left or right?" They both looked the same, Zim admitted. "Well then, you're not going to get very far." "Which way would you go?" Dib asked the dwarf. "Me? I wouldn't go either way," Hoggle answered. "If that's all you'll say, you can leave," Zim hissed as he continued observing the maze. "Maybe I can figure out which way to go if I use my pack legs to look over." "Good thinking, Zim. You try that," Dib agreed. Zim nodded as he activated his pack legs and lifted himself up, looking around. You know what your problem is, Huggle huffed. You take too much for granted. What's that supposed to mean? Dib frowned. Take this labyrinth, for instance, the dwarf continued. Even if you reach the center, you'll never get out again. No good, Zim sighed as he came back down and restored his pack legs. I can't make heads or tails of this labyrinth. Then I guess we have to figure it out ourselves, Dib sighed before turning back to Hoggle. Thanks for nothing, Hogwart. Oh, it's Hoggle, Hoggle hissed, and don't say I didn't warn you. With that, Hoggle exited the maze, slamming the doors behind him. Well, he seemed friendly, Zim frowned. What was he saying to you? Just something about taking things for granted and never finding a way out if we do end up getting to the center, Dib told him. Well, what does he know? He's just a grumpy old troll who likes harming other creatures. You got that right, Dib agreed. So, which way should we go? Well, I guess we should try going right, Zim suggested. Very well. Right then, Dib nodded. With that, the boys took the right path. As they walked, they stepped over logs and branches. They pushed back weeds and kicked back rocks. Once in a while, one of them would get rather clumsy and trip, but the other was always there to help them back up onto their feet. All in all, nothing was changing. What do they mean, labyrinth? Zim hissed after a while of non-stop walking. There aren't any turns or corners or anything. It just goes on and on. No, Dib shook his head. Maybe it doesn't. What are you blabbing about, Dib Stink? Think about it, Zim. About what the dwarf said. Maybe we're just taking it for granted that it does. Zim didn't understand what the human meant, but he was really not in the mood to question his antics. He just wanted to get the Dib sister and leave this place, hoping to never see it again. When Zim did not question, Dib nodded and began to run down the path. Zim blinked and soon followed him. They kept running like this for a couple more minutes, but they still hadn't come up to any turns. Frustrated, they began pounding on the sides, trying to find somewhat of a hidden opening. Zim had even pulled out his laser and shot at the wall, but whatever this labyrinth was made out of was Urkin-proof, for the weapon did no damage at all. Exhausted, the two sat up against the wall and slid down, sitting on the ground as they tried to catch their breath. This is ridiculous, Zim gasped. A labyrinth should not be this difficult to solve, especially for an Urkin invader. For once I agree with you, Dib nodded. I think this is the Goblin King's doing. He's not playing very fair, is he, Dib? Nope. Hello. The boys jumped at the small greeting. They looked around, but they only saw a strange worm with blue hair wearing a red scarf. Did you just say hello? Dib frowned. No, I said hello. The worm shook his head, startling them again, but that's close enough. Forgive my ignorance, but you're a worm, aren't you? Zim frowned as both he and Dib bent closer to the creature. Yeah, that's right. By any chance, do you know the way through this labyrinth? The Urkin pressed. Nah, I'm just a worm. Oh, both Zim and Dib sighed as they sat back with disappointment. Come and meet the missus, the worm offered them. No, thank you, Dib sighed, but we have to solve this labyrinth. But there aren't any turns or openings, Zim added. It just goes on and on. It's full of openings, the worm chuckled. Just you ain't seen them. Where are they? Dib asked. There's one right in front of you. Zim and Dib looked ahead, but all they saw was a wall. No, there isn't, Zim frowned. Come inside and have a nice cup of tea, the worm offered, ignoring Zim's statement. But there isn't an opening, Dib frowned. Of course there is, the worm nodded. Try walking through it. You'll see what I mean. Dib and Zim glanced at each other with confusion. They stood up and approached the wall. Hesitant, they turned back to the worm. Go on then, he nodded. But there's just a wall. There's no way through, Dib shook his head. Things aren't always what they seem, so you can't take anything for granted. That's just what the Hugbeast said, Zim gasped. Dib, I think we should try it. Well, I guess we should then, huh? Dib gulped. Nervous, the boys held each other's hands as they squeezed their eyes shut and stepped forward. When they felt nothing, they opened their eyes and gasped, shocked to see that it really was a hidden opening. They cried happily as they let go of each other's hand, like nothing happened. They smiled and began to continue their journey to the direction they were going. Hey, hang on, the worm shouted. Oh, he's right, Zim gasped. We should thank the worm creature. You're absolutely right, Zim, Dib nodded as they walked back. Thank you, that was incredibly helpful. But don't go that way, the worm cried. What was that? Zim frowned. I said, don't go that way, he repeated. Never go that way. Oh, Thanks, the boys cried as they went the opposite direction, not even bothering to ask why they can't go the way they were going to go. Well, if they had kept on going down that way, they'd have gone straight to that castle,